I'm 52, and I always thought I was the type who kept things safe and steady. But one night at a party showed me how wrong I was about surprises in life. My name's Karen. I've always thought of myself as a woman who played it safe. Married young. Stayed loyal, never strayed far from the life I built with my husband, Tom. We've had our rough patches, sure, but we've made it through them. I used to believe that love was something stable, predictable, that after a certain age, surprises just stopped happening. But I was wrong, so very wrong. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Please don't make the same mistake I did. It started the night of Mark and Joanne's anniversary party. One of those late spring evenings that still clung to a bit of chill, with the scent of magnolia in the air, and the distant hum of lawnmowers fading as the sun went down. Tom and I had both been invited. We were part of that tight-knit suburban circle that went to each other's barbecues, helped with school fundraisers, sent sympathy cards when someone's dog passed. Tom couldn't make it. Last-minute client emergency. So I went alone, not wanting to disappoint Joanne. She's been one of my closest friends for years. I wore a navy dress I hadn't pulled out since our niece's wedding, spritzed on a little perfume I hadn't used in months, and told myself it would just be a night of small talk and maybe a glass of wine. The house was packed. Laughter in the kitchen, music low in the background. One of those mellow playlists that sounded like it was made for people our age who used to dance, but now just sway and smile. I found myself chatting with old neighbors, catching up with folks I hadn't seen in years, and feeling a little more like the me I used to be before routines and calendars took over everything. That's when I noticed Jake. Jake is Tom's longtime friend. They go back to their college baseball days. He's always been around, always the guy with the quick wit, the laugh that fills a room, and those eyes that seem to hold more than he says out loud. But I'd never really seen him until that night. Maybe it was the way the low light from the patio lanterns caught the silver at his temples, or the way he looked at me when I said something about feeling like a ghost of my younger self, not with pity, but like he understood. We ended up talking for nearly an hour about nothing and everything, music, books we used to love, how time has a way of making you forget what made your heart beat fast when you were younger. He listened, not in that distracted nodding way men sometimes do. He really listened. By the time the party was winding down, I realized I'd had 2 glasses of wine and my ride, Tom, wasn't coming. I had planned to call a taxi, but Jake offered to drive me. His place was only a few blocks from mine, said it would be no trouble. I hesitated. It felt too personal somehow, but it also felt safe. The drive started in silence. The kind that isn't uncomfortable, just soft. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket when the night has been long. His car smelled faintly of cedar and something spicy, maybe aftershave or just him. I remember watching the streetlights glide across his face and wondering how I had never noticed how tired his eyes looked when he wasn't smiling. "You seem different tonight," he said suddenly, keeping his eyes on the road. I blinked. Different? How? He smiled a little, one corner of his mouth tugging upward. Lighter, or maybe just more you. I don't know. Like you let something go. I didn't know what to say to that. No one had noticed me like that in years. Maybe I just forgot to carry the weight tonight, I said, surprised by my own answer. He nodded slowly. Maybe that's something you should do more often. There was a pause, long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat, to feel the weight of something shifting between us that neither of us asked for. We pulled up in front of my house. The porch light was on, casting a soft glow on the steps. I'd walked up 1,000 times, but something about that night felt new. I turned to thank him, already reaching for the door handle, but he stopped me. "Karen." I looked at him. His voice was low, unsure. I saw something flicker in his expression, something I hadn't seen in years. Not from anyone. Not even Tom. He didn't say it then. Whatever it was, he swallowed it, just gave a small shake of his head, and smiled like he regretted saying my name. "Get some rest," he said. I stepped out of the car, my legs heavier than they should have been, and as he drove away, I stood there on the porch for a long time, staring at the taillights disappearing down the street. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that almost confession, was the beginning of everything that came next. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I sat on the edge of the bed in my robe, staring out the window at the slow drizzle brushing the glass. Tom was still asleep, breathing softly beside me, oblivious to the way my mind had been racing since Jake dropped me off. There wasn't anything wrong. Exactly. Nothing had happened, but there was something unspoken that hung in the air. Something I couldn't shake. I kept thinking about the way Jake had said my name, how it had trembled at the edge of something deeper. That hesitation, that moment of restraint, said more than any full sentence could. At breakfast, Tom asked me how the party went. I told him the usual, nice, crowded, good to see everyone. I didn't mention the drive home, not because I was hiding anything I told myself, but because it didn't feel like something that needed to be said. Or maybe I was afraid he'd see something in my face I hadn't admitted to yet. Later that afternoon, I found myself in the garden, kneeling beside the hydrangeas, gloved hands sunk in wet earth, just trying to quiet my thoughts. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from Jake. "Hey, I hope it was okay that I said what I did last night. If not, I'm sorry. Just felt like you needed to hear it." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering above the keyboard. I typed something, erased it, typed again. It was okay. Just caught me off guard, I guess. I wasn't expecting anyone to really see me like that. The 3 dots popped up, then disappeared, then popped up again. "You deserve to be seen, Karen. More than you know." That one hit me like a warm ache in the chest. I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone spoke to me like that, like I mattered in a way beyond obligation or routine. Over the next week, we started texting more. At first, it was light music recommendations, old movie quotes, silly memes that made me laugh more than they should have. But in between the laughs were these quiet check-ins. "How was your day? You seemed tired yesterday. Everything okay? Thought of you when I heard that Van Morrison song you like." It felt harmless yet increasingly intimate. A conversation I found myself craving even though I knew it was towing a line. One afternoon, while Tom was away on a business trip, I got a message from Jake driving past the old coffee shop downtown. "Remember how we all used to go there after softball games? Want to meet for a quick cup?" I stared at the message for longer than I should have. My thumb shook slightly as I replied, "Sure, just for a bit." When I walked into the cafe, Jake was already there, 2 mugs steaming on the table. He looked up and smiled, standing to pull my chair out like we were on a date. I laughed nervously and told him that was unnecessary. "Old habits," he said with a shrug asterisk. It felt natural. Too natural. We talked like old friends who had somehow found a new version of themselves in each other. I caught myself watching the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. He noticed when I brushed a strand of hair behind my ear and looked away. But nothing crossed the line until we were walking back to our cars. The sky was streaked with orange and gold. The breeze was cool and soft, and Jake stopped mid-step. "Karen," he said again, that same low, hesitant tone from the night of the party. "I know this probably isn't fair to say, but I've thought about you more than I should lately. You feel like someone I missed without realizing it." I opened my mouth, closed it. My heart was thumping in my chest. "I'm not asking for anything," he added quickly. "I just needed you to know because it's real. And it's been a long time since something felt real." I didn't run. I didn't lean in either. I just stood there soaking in his words, feeling the ground shift under my feet. I should go, I whispered. He nodded. Yeah, I get it. But as I turned toward my car, my fingers trembled on the handle because something inside me had been stirred awake. Something I hadn't realized I'd buried. And suddenly, going back to the life I had before didn't feel so simple anymore. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope I hadn't agreed to climb. Everything in my world was the same. Dinners with Tom, phone calls with my sister, quiet evenings folding laundry while something forgettable played on TV. And yet, I wasn't the same. I found myself checking my phone too often, anticipating a message that might not come. And when Jake did text, short simple things like, "Hope your day is not too heavy," or "Heard a song that reminded me of you again," it sent a flutter through me I hadn't felt since my 20s. Not that I could tell anyone. I couldn't. I didn't want this to be something I had to explain or defend. I didn't want judgment. Not from others and not from myself. Then one Saturday, Jake messaged me something different. "Hey, I'm heading to the lake for a drive. Haven't done it in years. Thought you might want to come along." No pressure. Just felt like asking. I stared at the message for nearly 10 minutes. My hands were damp. My heart felt loud. Tom had gone golfing for the day with some colleagues. He wouldn't be home until late. I knew what I should do, but I didn't do it. Instead, I typed back, "Okay, just for a bit." Jake picked me up in his old dark blue SUV. He looked surprised when I stepped out of the house. Jeans and a windbreaker, like he wasn't sure I'd really come. "You look peaceful," he said. I laughed, though I felt anything but the drive to the lake was quiet at first. The hum of the engine, the occasional turn signal, and the faint rhythm of his fingers tapping the steering wheel. I watched the trees blur by and wondered what I was doing, why I was here, what it meant that I hadn't said no. When we got to the lake, it was nearly empty. A few families on the far shore, a couple walking a dog. The sky was overcast, but the water was still and reflective like a sheet of smoky glass. We walked along the edge, our shoes crunching over gravel. Jake kept his hands in his pockets. I wrapped my arms around myself like armor. "I used to come here when I needed to think," he said softly. "Back when life felt simpler. Or maybe I was just too young to know how complicated things could get." I nodded, not trusting my voice. We reached a small wooden bench near the water and sat down. I could hear the quiet lap of the water against the rocks, the wind rustling the trees behind us. "I'm not trying to mess anything up," he said after a long silence. "I know you're married. I respect Tom. But I need you to know. Being near you, talking to you, it's the most alive I've felt in years. And I don't think nothing." I turned to him, finally meeting his eyes. They weren't demanding, just open, honest. "I don't know what to do with that," I whispered. "You don't have to do anything," he said. "I just didn't want to keep pretending like it wasn't there." I looked out at the lake again, at the ripples spreading across the water from a stone someone had tossed in the distance. It felt like a metaphor. Something small creating something wide. "I feel it too," I finally admitted. He closed his eyes and let out a breath that sounded like relief and sorrow all at once. "But I can't cross that line," I added. Jake nodded slowly. "I know." We sat there until the sun started to dip lower, casting a faint golden sheen over everything. On the drive back, we didn't speak much, but the silence between us had changed. It wasn't heavy with confusion anymore. It was filled with understanding, and the quiet ache of knowing some things must stay untouched, even when they stir something real inside you. When he pulled into my driveway, I reached for the door handle and paused. Thank you, I said. For what? For not making me feel ashamed. He smiled gently. You don't deserve to carry shame, Karen, just truth. And as I stepped out of the car and walked back into the life I had always known, I realized something I hadn't before. That truth and desire can live side by side, quietly, respectfully. And that sometimes just being seen is enough to wake up the parts of ourselves we thought we'd lost. The days after the lake felt quieter somehow. Not empty, but still like the pause between heartbeats. I didn't see Jake, and we didn't message much. Just the occasional check-in, like we were both making sure the other hadn't vanished. Life resumed its normal rhythm. Laundry, grocery lists, Tom reading the news aloud. In the morning like it was meant to spark conversation. But I had changed inside. Something had settled, not into certainty, but into clarity one morning. Tom and I were having coffee at the kitchen table. The sun was coming through the window in soft golden bands, and the sound of birdsong filtered in through the screen. He was talking about a contractor delay at work, but I wasn't fully listening. I was watching his hands, the same hands I'd held for almost 30 years. They looked different now, older, worn, but they were still his. And I realized suddenly, and with sharp honesty, that I had been sleepwalking through parts of our marriage. We both had. We let routine take the place of intimacy, familiarity take the place of curiosity. That night after dinner, I sat beside Tom on the couch and reached for his hand. He looked at me surprised. Do you remember when we used to just talk? I asked, not about bills or schedules. Just talk. He blinked at me. Yeah, I guess we haven't done that in a while. So, we did. We talked about everything and nothing. About who we were before the years stacked up. I didn't bring up Jake, not because I was hiding, but because this wasn't about him. It was about us. What we still had. What we had let fade. That conversation became a turning point. We started walking in the evenings again like we used to when the kids were still home. We cooked together on weekends. We laughed, not always easily, but honestly. Something tender returned. Something unspoken began to mend. A few weeks later, I saw Jake. Again. I was leaving the market when I spotted him near the entrance holding a bag of groceries. Our eyes met. He smiled. Hey, he said gently. Hey. There was a pause. Not awkward, just full. You look good, he said. I feel good, I replied. And I meant it. We stood there for a moment, just breathing in the space between us. Then I stepped closer. I'll always be grateful for that night, I said. For the things we said. For what you helped me see in myself. But I need to move forward with what I have. And choosing the life I built. He nodded. I hoped you would. And I knew he meant it. As I walked back to my car, the breeze picked up, lifting my hair from my shoulders. The sun felt warmer than it had in weeks. Later that evening, as Tom and I sat on the porch, sharing a bottle of wine, and watching the last light slip behind the trees, he reached over and touched my knee. You seem lighter lately, he said. I looked at him, smiling softly. Maybe I just remembered how to carry things differently. He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't have to. There are moments in life that wake you up. They don't always come in the ways you expect. Sometimes it's not a thunderclap, but a soft voice in the dark. A quiet ride home. A shared silence by the lake. I made a choice. Not out of guilt. Not out of fear. But from understanding. And I carry that night with me still, not as a burden, but as a whisper, a reminder that being seen is powerful, and that sometimes the most important journey is the one that brings you back home to yourself.